Welcome to the In Chamber, the place where we focus on the issues and people that shape business success. I'm your co-host, Rebecca Patrick. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications for the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. Joining me at the microphone is Anthony Shutley, our Director of Communications. In Chamber is presented by the Talent Resource Navigator. Today, we are chatting with Paul Nselel, President and CEO of AgReliant Genetics, which is the third largest seed corn company in the U.S. and in the top 4 agricultural research programs in North America. The company is based in Westfield. Paul took the reins at AgReliant 2 years ago and is not your typical seed company executive. Born in Cameroon as the son of a pineapple exporter, Paul brings an outside perspective that comes from years at Nike and in the financial sector. Paul, thanks for chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me.
If we could start out, just talk a little bit more about your rather fascinating upbringing and any of your educational background that you want to share.
So, as you said, Rebecca, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm grateful for being here. As you said, I grew up in Cameroon. That's where I was born. Both of my parents are from there. And I spent most of my primary and secondary education there. Then went to undergrad in France, studied math, as most reasonably good student did back then. And started my career in basically in investment banking in Europe, working for Paribas. And then later on, moved to the US to do my MBA at the Wharton School. Joined Lehman in New York, and after a few years at Lehman and Nike, was at Monsanto for the better part of 10 years before essentially spending time in the food business and joining AgReliant about 2 years ago.
Great. How did you make that transition to the agriculture industry? I know you've been there, you had a couple different stints, but what was it like working at Nike and going to the agricultural industry? And is that maybe something, did you always have an interest in agriculture? I know maybe from your family background.
Yeah, so when I was a lot younger, my father worked for a pineapple exporter back in Cameroon. So I've always been a little bit into ag, but not, essentially living in a large city, right? My transition to agriculture is actually an interesting story. I was working for Nike. This is in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. And I had this opportunity to join Monsanto, through headhunting and all that. And so I actually had a long conversation with a very good friend of mine from Nebraska, who I had met in Paris about 20 years earlier. And so I called him and I asked him, hey, listen, I have this opportunity that is intriguing to go work in row crop agriculture, and I would love to get your perspective on it. And so what he said, listen, Paul, I live in Broken Bow, Nebraska. So how about you get in your car, you drive to Nebraska, and we're going to spend a week with farmers in Nebraska. And after that, you'll get some perspective to be able to basically make a decision. So I drove from Portland, Oregon to Broken Bow, Nebraska, pretty much central Nebraska. It took me about 2 days. Then I spent 5.5 days with JP. And every morning we would wake up and we would go to the coffee shop and spend a little bit of time, meet with farmers, and basically seek their advice, right? And then at the end of the day, this is like in the early May timeframe in 2009. At the end of the day, we would grill something and then just have a conversation about what we heard that day. And at the end of the 5 days, JP told me, well, this is what farming is about. This is pioneer country, but farmers are essentially the same around the country. You got a really good perspective. And so I was intrigued, but very interested in what could be the future, and I decided to join.
Sort of, what lessons, if you go back a little bit to your time at Nike and Lehman Brothers, what sort of lessons from those jobs have you taken with you to the agriculture?
It's a little bit, so both are a little bit different. Lehman Brothers was a very rigorous, and I know now that the company is since bankrupt, but they were very rigorous in terms of the training they were providing to people and the quality of work that was getting done, at least at a junior level, right? So you learn sort of like the rigor of how to get things done. At Nike was a little bit different. It was more about customer focus. It's a company that is extremely focused on customer, extremely protective of its brand. And so there is a lot to learn there about how to approach customer, how to maintain those relationships, how to protect the brand as the best asset. And it's just obviously remains an elite company, you know. And so those skills are very transferable, right? At the end of the day, when I think about farmers, they pay the bills, right? So there is an element of customer focus that is really, really important in what we do. And it translates into agronomy advice. It translates into the quality of the product that we are providing. And, you know, sort of like the advice that comes across with that. It also translates into understanding fundamentally what decision they make and how we can continue to partner with them as they make those decisions throughout the season.
Paul, the marketing of Nike is omnipresent, it seems like, and you're at Nike, you're working with some of the biggest names anywhere, and you know, talking about Jordan and LeBron James. I guess I'm kind of wanting you to compare and contrast what it's like marketing on that side versus marketing for whether it's a company like Monsanto or AgReliant.
Yeah, and you know, I think there are a few differences, and I want to be, you know, the differences is obviously on the Nike side you are B2C, so you're directly with the consumer, right? And there's a lot of promotion of the brand, right? And the product is a little bit sort of subordinate to that. Those are actually quite interesting. On the you know, it's a when I think about farming is more than a job. It's a way of life, right? And so, yes, we are in a B2B, but we are really in folks who are living their work, right? And so that relationship is a lot deeper. And if you think about the row crop farmer in North America, they essentially have somewhere around 40 seasons in their lifetime, maybe a little bit more. And so every season counts, and you don't have 4 seasons in a year, and you know, so it's, you know, every season is really critically important, right? So the focus on the customer becomes really critical as we approach farmers. The other piece is the ticket item, right? So when you think about what farmers pay every year, when you think about an average, you know, farmers here in the US, you know, their corn bill could essentially be buying a house every year, right? So it's a different scale of commitment, and it's something that is a lot more significant than buying a pair of sneakers or just a you know, an outfit, right? So those are some of the fundamental differences.
What's the ag product equivalent of Air Jordans?
Oh wow, it's probably fantastic genetics coming from AgReliant on the variety of traits that we have to provide, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, you know, maybe agriculture doesn't sound as sexy as Nike, but it really, you know, if you look at it, it really is in a lot of ways. And so, you know, I'm kind of curious about, you know, when you joined AgReliant in July 2020, why was that an appealing move for you?
I mean, it's a fantastic company, right? I mean, we are in the top 3 here in North America when it comes to corn. It's a company that is really focused on, you know, we have our own breeding program. We provide trait choice. We provide germ choice on corn and soybean. We here in the US through both of our brands of LG and AgroGold, and in Canada with Pride. It's you know, I like to say that we are a big small and a small big. You know, we're big enough to have our breeding program, big enough to be national, big enough to have 2 brands, big enough to go through several go-to-market and reach farmers throughout this wonderful country. but yet we are also small enough that, a number of farmers and customers have my cell phone number, right? And they can call me and basically have a conversation with me about things that go well or not go well, and then we can work it out and figure out how we resolve some of those problems, right? So it puts us, in my opinion, sort of like in that right size that is really perfect to be able to connect with our customers.
Paul, is there something that makes Indiana and Central Indiana in particular a very fertile place for seed companies? I mean, you've got you've got your company, you've got Corteva, you've got Beck Seeds. What makes this part of the country so good for seed companies?
Indiana is obviously a nice state, right? So when you think about row crop agriculture, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois are pretty critical state when it comes to row crop agriculture. So that's one piece. I think for folks who don't know Indiana, it's actually a very friendly environment for business. And I got to say, I've been here only 2 years, and I've actually been very impressed by the business environment here, the collaboration that exists between all sort of like the economic power that exists in these states, the business folks, the representative, the elected representative from both sides, partnering with the business community to really try and create an environment that benefits both the business and the people of Indiana, right? So for me, it's been a very positive surprise. And it's I really wish it was an area that would be explored by more people, because again, having lived throughout this wonderful country, it's really a great state.
Paul, you've had as Rebecca pointed out, an extremely interesting career in some of the companies you've worked for, and your personal background as well. I'm wondering, who have been the biggest influences in your life, both personal and professional?
Well, so that's interesting. I think there are a lot of people. There is a saying in French that he was the self-made man who owed his lack of success to nobody, right? So I've been very fortunate to meet a number of wonderful people who have really guided me throughout. Obviously, it starts with my parents, right? So just the culture of hard work and dedication. And so I owe them a lot, in particular my mother, right? And then it goes through like the number of mentors that I've been able to have throughout my career, both in Europe and here in North America. And I really think it's, I almost feel like I would not be fair in naming some folks, because I would inevitably forget some others. But it's really about all those folks that I've met who have allowed me to make mistakes, right? And guided me and really encouraged me and walked me through some of the pitfalls, and were really a part of in a lot of ways who I am today. Obviously, I continue to make a number of mistakes that are my own, but I've been really fortunate to meet fantastic people who have borderline thought about my own career as a way of really realizing something, including for themselves. So I'm very grateful for that, right?
Born in Cameroon and having worked for a string of global companies, when you look at the challenges today in farming and agriculture, do you bring a global perspective, or are you more focused on the U.S. since you're based here now?
Yeah, so I think it's a few things, right? I think what the global perspective allows me to do is really the importance of what we do and the importance of what we do relative to mankind, right? When you look at some of the geopolitical events that we're facing today and the disruption in some remote parts of the world, because there's no wheat, there is no X, Y, or Z crop. What we do and what the American farmer does is really, really important, right? In terms of the number of people the American farmer feeds around the world. My day-to-day work is really focused on North America, right? And it's focused on how do my team and I enable and support the American farmer And eventually, the work of that American farmer really goes throughout the world and get exported and feeds people throughout this planet, right? So again, my day-to-day work is really focused on North America.
Paul, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities facing farmers today, domestically and globally?
I think there are a few things. I think like most folks in the world, we are in an environment with significant amount of inflation, right? So rising cost. I think that's one piece. I think the other piece is also around technology, and I think we as company can play a role in terms of the innovation that we bring to bear to be able to use more parsimoniously the natural resources, whether it be water or other pieces, right, to be able to produce more with less. And I think we as a company play a significant role in that, right? And I also think we have to continue to advocate for farmers, right, because they do something that is fantastic in their work every day. But obviously, just naturally, our profession is full of people who are generally mostly understated and focused on what they're doing, and not people who are naturally pounding their chest, right? So there is a partnership that we have to have there too, in terms of, continue to show that as an industry, we are actually natural steward of the resources of the planet.
Now, a quick word about our sponsor. The Talent Resource Navigator is a new free online tool that offers the convenience of one-stop shopping for education and job training opportunities. Supported by on-demand customer service and technical assistance, the Navigator intentionally guides and connects individuals and employers with a tailored set of talent development resources based on each user's identified needs. Details at talentresourcenavigator.com. The costs of almost everything seem to be going up right now. How big of a hit do you see farmers taking, and what's been the impact on margins for farm operations?
So the one thing that I would say is relative to that is really the way we think about it. We really think about it in terms of how do we continue to enable higher productivity, and how do we continue to get more reasonably out of the same acre, right? So it starts with the breeding technology that we bring to bear. So how we bring genetics every year that produce basically a little bit more than the year before. All the folks that we have here who spend somewhere between 40 and 50,000 hours selecting hybrids that are going to eventually make it to the fields of farmers. And so for us, it's really about building the confidence in the technology to be able to help farmers really produce more and again, helping that equation of the P&L be better, right? So that's primarily our focus. So for us, it really starts with technology and innovation, and that becomes our focus. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, some specifics of what AgReliant is doing to help farmers sort of overcome maybe the current conditions they may be facing?
So specifically, I think, like I said earlier, I think it starts with all the efforts that we're putting into breeding technology, right? And, as I said before, our breeders are using a number of tools, whether it's genomic selection or genomic-enabled prediction, to narrow down hybrid candidates, right? And these tools are really helping us get better genetics in the hands of the farmers. And I mentioned before that our agronomists were spending 50,000 plus hours walking fields, selecting hybrids, providing real-time feedback to make sure that only the elite of the elite genetics make it to the farm of our customers. And so that's how we think about enabling farmers, is really solving that through technology and the quality of the hybrids that we're making available to them.
Maybe another way we can look at it might be interesting to hear. So in good times and bad, if you could just walk us through a little bit of the conversations and how AgReliant interacts with the farmer?
So I think a lot of those conversations, obviously have to do with, we generally start with what the objectives of the farmer are, right? Some of them are going to be more, quote unquote, risk averse. Some of them are going to be trying to find the more of the top end of the yield, right? And so we're going to look at their specific condition, whether those are the soil condition, their specific environment, and our agronomists and salespeople are going to come up with a recommendation that is really fitting both the environment of that specific farm operation, as well as the risk profile or the desire of that farmer. And then we're going to build together sort of like a crop plan or a recommendation for that farmer that will be a combination of hybrid. Many times that combination of hybrids is also going to be recommended with a planting rate. And we're going to help them position all of that, right? And so those conversations start really very, very early. And then throughout the season, we're having those conversations, obviously at planting, at emergence, with scouting their field, giving them sort of like advice and feedback and ideas throughout the season. And then at the end of the year, when it comes harvest time, which is generally a happy time for farmers, we're looking at with them, sort of like the yield and the result of their labor, and basically having a little bit of a review session about like what happened, what worked, what didn't work, and how do we adjust as we look into the year to come, right? So it's really a conversation that is throughout the year, a conversation that takes place. It's not just a transaction. It's really about how we stay close to them, how we provide advice, and how we continue to gain their trust and confidence so that relationship becomes perennial.
It's really it's a very significant partnership, for these farmers, because it's their livelihood.
It's their livelihood. It's their livelihood. It's their way of living, and so it's again, it's something that is extremely critical to them, and quite frankly, to mankind. Right. So we think our job and what we do is not just a job. It's something that is really critical for the planet. Right.
In Indiana, we hear a lot from people born and raised here about their sort of appraisal of Indiana agriculture and the role it plays nationally and globally. Since you bring a little bit of an outsider's perspective to this, I want to get your opinion on how you think Indiana farmers are doing, and what's the significance of the role they play beyond the state's borders?
Yeah, I mean, I think Indiana agriculture has a great impact in our state and beyond. And if I'm not mistaken, I think our state is one of the top 8 exporters of agricultural product. Agriculture here in Indiana contributes $30+ billion to our state economy and in jobs, right? We ourselves as a company are employing a number of people here, along with some of the partners that are working with us on the sort of retail and agent side, selling our product. I think the state has an exceptional reputation for agricultural science and innovation. I mean, obviously, there are the 2 major academic institutions in the state that are providing fantastic education and really in line with the reputation of the state. There is the AgriNovice Indiana organization led by Mitch Fraser. They're doing an exceptional job with all the collaboration and the startup they're bringing out here, and the agricultural scientists. It's just really fantastic job done there. And for me, it's really a lot of it is about inclusion and bringing outsiders and bringing sort of like a level of complementarity between some of the major ag company here with the startups that are, trying to bring additional technology to our industry. So it's, I think both the state and sort of the region and some of the organizations like AgriNovis Indiana are playing a fantastic role in sort of supporting both the reputation and the work that is being done in this state relative to agriculture.
That's the perfect segue to our next question, which has to do with technology. But first, Paul, I wanted to ask you about something you just said there. You had kind of mentioned some of the things that AgriNovis is doing, and in talking to Mitch Frazier last week, he had said that his organization likes to take a broader view, and I thought this was really interesting, that the Indiana agricultural economy is known to be about a $31 billion economy, but Mitch had pointed out when you factor in all of the ag tech companies and all those other companies that do those sorts of things, it's really a $52 billion industry. How do you guys see that?
I mean, I think I would tend to agree with Mitch that obviously the bottom line is, first of all, the impact is pretty significant, right? I also think there is the direct impact of the industry that we mentioned earlier, but there is also sort of like the multiplier effect, not just the industry itself, but outside of the industry, as well as some of the startup. And for us, the startup are always an element of innovation that is can be very narrow, can be very niche, but can also be interesting, whether it's related to potential partnership or just collaboration that we can have with some of those startups, right? So I am myself in the board of AgriNovis Indiana, and like I said before, Mitch and his team are doing a fantastic job there, and it's something that we're following fairly closely because every now and then there are some very, very good ideas coming out of those some of those startups.
Rebecca and I both live in, I wouldn't maybe say rural areas, but areas very close to rural communities. I mean, you can't drive very far where I live without seeing fields and combines and all of that. And for a long time, it seems like agriculture was kind of almost, I don't want to say seen as an antiquated industry, but it certainly wasn't a technologically advanced industry. That wasn't their brand, right? So you can't talk these days without talking about technology in agriculture, from GPS guided tractors and drones to harvest automation and high-tech greenhouses. The industry has been dramatically impacted in recent years by these things. So what do you see as the upside and downside, if there is one, to these technological advancements, and how is AgReliant helping farmers make the transition or even accelerating technological advancements?
So for us, honestly, I see a significant amount of upside in technology. I don't see a lot of downside in technology. I think technology allows us to really, practice farming, allows the farmers to practice farming with more precision, right? We are able to actually provide more information, more insight that enables them to really get the most out of their field. I think it does a few things. It improves productivity. Quite frankly, it improves the quality of life of farmers, and also the amount of data that is actually coming out of all of that technological advance enables us to even get more innovation out of that, right? So if you think about that, the data, whether it's at planting, at harvest, the data throughout the season are elements that can feed into our breeding program. So that's one. The other piece is also the level and the quality of service that we can provide to farmers is really informed by data and helping us really focus on what matters the most, right? So throughout the season, I see that as being an exceptional benefit. And I think there are a few things that are interesting there. One is there is the innovation that is really focused on agriculture, but there is a second order innovation for me, which is the innovation that actually started in other industry, but that may have application into agriculture, right? So whether it is along the lines of like life science and genetics, or along the lines of like equipment and some of those other pieces that really started in other fields and are now sort of like is trickling down to agriculture and really helping us do the most out of this. So I see that as being all positive. And I think with farmers becoming generally, larger and larger, I think it also helps them get an even better hand in like their food operation to be able to manage that with precision. Yes.
I don't know what was more stunning, hearing about what some of these machines could do, like the combines. I mean, to your point, Randy Cron, the head of the Indiana Farm Bureau, was saying it tells them the soil temperature, what seed to plant, how much to plant, where to plant it. I mean, it's really far beyond anything I'd ever known or heard about. But the cost of one of these, it's not fair to call it a tractor, a combine, whatever you want to call it, is $500,000 potentially. Like, Paul, how do farmers manage the costs? I mean,
I think we have to see that in sort of like a broader view, in my opinion, in that if you think about just the improvement in yields, right, over the past 10, 20, 30 years, we are now pretty close to 180 bushel an acre in corn when, not so long ago, we were below 150, right? In soybean, it's not unusual now to get like 85, 90 bushel per acre. I remember 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, 50, 55 was a good day, a really, really good day. So, when you look at it and you look at like the improvement that is happening in sort of like low to mid single digit in a yield every year on a per acre basis, it's really, about the rate of innovation that gets us more productivity, and that productivity in turn helps fund that innovation that will then get us more productivity again. It's, obviously we have to continue to fund innovation. And I think companies like ours spend a significant amount of a percentage of our revenue into innovation to make sure that we offer farmer the best, because that's what they deserve. And so the overall math of it is always has something of being a little impressive, but it's not the math ends up working because it's creating value for everyone.
So switching gears just a little bit, we hear a lot about vertical farming and hydroponics. That seems to be a big part of the farm to table movement, and bringing in some way smaller agricultural farms or operations closer to urban areas or suburban areas. Is AgReliant involved in this, and how do you see this playing into the wider agriculture industry?
I think historically, even though consumer have been the ultimate customer, I think as a community in agriculture, we haven't always done a fantastic job in explaining to customer what we do and why we do it. I actually think farmers are doing a much, much better job than they are perceived of doing, right? And I think there is definitely an opportunity there to become and to be sort of like better and louder advocate of some of the practices that farmers are having. I think it's very clear that activists and social influencers are having voices that are louder than farmers. And it's also clear that the innovations in agriculture haven't always been understood very well by the broader public. And I think we owe both our industry and farmer doing a better job in explaining some of those innovations and showing in which way those are really very good for stewarding resources of the planet. And I think, when it comes to food security in general, I think there are a few things that we have to think about. I think one is choice, right? I think it's certainly important to have options out there. There's a place for urban agriculture. There's a place for organic agriculture. There's a place for intensive farming, right? It's a matter of choice and it's a matter of cost, right? And the reality of it is, when you think about the cost and the ability to really feed the broader population, you really need to have access to all those methods of farming to be able to provide enough at a reasonable cost in these times of inflation to allow folks to be able to be fed at a reasonable cost, right? So we will always be advocate of choice, right? And I think there's a place for all of those techniques of farming out there. And I think that's kind of how I see that.
Rebecca, if I could I ask one real quick question?
Sure.
I know we're running up against it, but Paul, there's been a lot of consolidation of farms. So there's a lot of corporate farming. There's a lot of big farms. But where I grocery shop, they have all these placards up about all the small farmers they do business with. And so that is obviously something the consumer wants. Is there a place for small farmers, for farmers who maybe farm 500 acres, 1,000 acres, even 2,500 acres?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there is definitely a place for small to medium-sized farmer. So first of all, I would say 2,500 acres is definitely not a small farmer, but there is a place for small farmer. We have a number of farmers who are our customers that are, 500, 800 acres. And those are still pretty meaningful operations, right? And we support them in what we do. Obviously, there is a trend for consolidation, but we support farmers, and we partner with some of our distribution, both agent as well as our own agronomists, to be able to provide the right level of advice, leveraging technology with all different sizes of farmers. But there is definitely a place for them.
Agriculture is such a broad topic, and we've covered a lot of ground here. But is there anything else, be it trends, best practices, or any industry concerns that you wanted to mention before we close?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say is, we as a company, as AgReliant Genetics, we place a huge value into relationships. I mentioned earlier that we consider ourselves to be a small big and a big small, and this idea that as a leadership team, all the way to myself, we're accessible to our customer. I think it's, it really says a lot about the value that we place in the relationship that we have with our employees, our suppliers, and certainly our customers. And we feel like we are large enough to provide farmers with incredible choices of genetics and product. And then we're small enough to be adaptable, responsive, and really accessible to our customer. We are proud and grateful to be serving the North American farmer every day, and we'll continue to work very hard to continue to gain and maintain their trust, because we think the work they do is absolutely fundamental. And certainly I want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to share what AgReliant Genetics does, and how proud we are to work every day with the North American farmer, and we hope to continue to advocate for those folks.
Well, thank you, Paul. We enjoyed it very much. In Chamber is presented by the Talent Resource Navigator. In the August edition of the Chamber's Biz Voice magazine, we further explore what agriculture looks like in 2022 with the businesses, technologies, and state programs at the forefront, as well as what is on the horizon for the industry. You can read those stories at bizvoicemagazine.com. As always, thank you for listening.